Alright, let's look at learning objective D. We're going to examine how to do a grid call for fire. This is your second option at the call for fire lane. Again, we're not going to touch on the third, but we'll talk about that more later. Okay, so when you're doing a grid fire mission, it's probably the simplest in terms of format, but you have to do a little more legwork figuring out the grid of that target. You may have used that by doing your own polar plot. If you knew the direction and distance from you to the target, you can plot that on a map and record a grid that way. You may be able to terrain associate, which that can be really helpful if you're in a situation where magnetic interference is preventing you getting a good compass azimuth or using your some of your technology. But if you can figure out where that point is on the map using terrain association with roads or other buildings, then you can get a sufficiently accurate grid for the area fire weapon system that we're using. So the mission looks just like this. Go state 4, this is Shavetail 01, adjust fire, over. Grid 4435 56 9er 9er, over. 1 SA11 stationary in the open, over. Direction 1200, over. Now notice a couple things about this format that's different than polar. In the station identification and warning order in the first transmission, there's just adjust fire. Grid is the default. You don't have to say anything else. You don't have to specify that it's adjust fire grid, over. It's a no-go. Target location in the standard is just providing a grid. I mentioned earlier I recommend 8 digits. 6 is okay. You can do 10, but 10 is excessive. Then we've got our target description, number, what it is, what it's doing, and then level of protection, over. And then finally, in this format, they've included a 4th transmission where they're sending the direction. Personally, I like sending the direction with the grid transmission. We have an acronym called GAD, Grid Altitude Direction, that we send with grid missions for 3-dimensional targeting purposes. But don't worry about that. In fact, I probably shouldn't have even mentioned it. But anyway, you can send the direction after you send the 3rd transmission, or you can wait after the message to observer that we'll talk about in a minute, and you can send the direction when you send your first correction, because that's when they have to have it. They have to know what that angle is that they're adjusting the rounds along. Alright, so what is the minimum number of digits required by the FDC for a grid fire mission? It is 6. You can go up to 10. 6 will get you within 100 meters, 8 within 10 meters, and 10 digits will get you down to 1 meter. When do you state direction with the grid mission? Just talked about that. You can send it after your 3rd transmission or before your first correction. Either one is fine. Alright, ELOE is about shifting from a known point. You are not going to have any known points, so we are not going to worry about that at all. I'm leaving these slides in the slideshow, so if you want to look these over, if you're just interested in the mechanics of fire support, you can, but we're just gonna skip on to ELOF. This is the elements of the message to observer. So after you've sent your fire mission and it's been processed, the Fire Direction Center prepares a message to observer, and then that is relayed to the forward observer. It has 4 components. First, it's got the call sign of the unit to fire. In this example, we're going to use Bravo. It has changes to the call for fire. Now in this example it says HEVT in effect, which is high explosive variable time. There's only changes to the call for fire are only mentioned if they're going against something you previously requested. Like if you asked for DPICM as the round and that got nixed, then they would send the round type, HEVT in effect. Then they'll send the number of rounds per tube and fire for effect. If we're firing from our Bravo mortar element as the firing element, they have two 120 millimeter mortars firing 2 rounds each, so what that's telling you is you're getting 4 rounds. If it's Bravo battery from 163rd, and our SOP would dictate all that, or the op order and NXD with fire support would articulate all of that for you, but you might be getting 6 guns firing 2 rounds each, which would tell you you're going to have 12 rounds dropped on the target. And then finally you're assigned a target number. So it would look something like this. Message to observer, Bravo, 2 rounds, HEVT in effect, target number Alpha Bravo 2001, over. And then you have to, you as the observer, read the entire message to observer back to the fire cell. So you will, as an observer, get a message to observer, and your responsibility is to read that back. Another example, message to observer, Alpha, 3 rounds, target number Alpha Bravo 2001. In this case, there were no changes to the call for fire, so they only received those 3 components: firing unit, rounds in fire for effect, and then the target number.